Iraqi security forces and armed groups backed by Iran, known as the Popular Mobilization Forces or PMF, hunt ISIL sleeper cells in northern Iraq. The US calls the PMF Iran's proxy militia. They were set up after a decree by Iraq's top Shia cleric calling on Iraqis to fight ISIL when the Iraqi military fled an ISIL offensive on the city of Mosul in 2014. Tens of thousands of PMF fighters were formally integrated into Iraq's security forces 2 years later. Military analysts say they were vital in the battle against ISIL, a fight the Iraqi Prime Minister said was won in 2017. But some PMF factions have warned they would support Iran if there was a military escalation between the US and Iran, potentially jeopardizing the fight against ISIL.
Any conflict would weaken Iraq's security and defense establishment, including the PMFs, because some of these armed groups would divert their focus from fighting ISIL to siding with Iran. ISIL would be given a huge opportunity to penetrate the areas they once occupied, as we have seen sleeper cells trying to do in recent days.
This video shows Iraqi military airstrikes on ISIL targets in the Humreen Mountains in Salahuddin province. Army commanders say sleeper cells of ISIL fighters have been trying to recruit in the area. Analysts say ISIL would exploit any deterioration in Iraq's stability, especially if there was a military escalation between the US and Iran. There have been increasing attacks by ISIL in the west and the north of the country in recent months. Car bombs killed 5 civilians and 3 members of the Iraqi security forces in 2 separate attacks in recent days. The hunt for ISIL sleeper cells goes on across remote areas of Iraq.
The Iraqi security forces continue their military operations across the vast desert of Anbar. This includes search and destroy missions of any ISIL remnant and sleeper cells that have recently attacked remote villages and towns.
As US pressure on Iran increased earlier this month, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned the Iraqi government about what he said was intelligence showing increased specific threats against US interests in Iraq. The Iraqi government denied there were any threats from the PMF. Days later, a rocket was fired into the Green Zone in Baghdad, which is home to the US and other embassies. No one claimed responsibility. A sign that increased tension between the US and Iran has dangerous implications for the stability of Iraq and could ultimately weaken international coalition efforts to fight ISIL, which has killed thousands of people in attacks in this region and beyond. Stratford, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.